wish to welcome you to this, the first Heritage Lecture in the 150th season of Chautauqua. Just so you know, the question and answer period will be done with written questions. You will see two of the archive staff around who will have pieces of paper and pencils. Raise your hand, they will give you one. Write your question down. They'll just confirm that they understand what the question is. Bring it up here, and then Greg will read the question in the Q&A. I'd like to draw your attention to the Heritage Lecture next week, which will be given by Patrick Whitten. Patrick has been diving in Chautauqua Lake for some time and hauling out a variety of artifacts. These artifacts are now on display in the Oliver Archive Center, which is just down this street here, right at the corner of South and Massey Avenues. It's the red brick building. We are open from 10 to 3 for you to come in and view them, but we also have a contest this week. We haven't identified what the items are. Instead, we're going to give you a sheet, and you can take a guess. Next Tuesday, using a panel of local historians, we are going to select a winner with the best sheet, and you'll get a prize. I'll tell you later maybe what the prize is. I haven't figured that part out, but it'll be a prize. I also want to invite you to come to the archives anytime you want. Again, our hours are 10 to 3, Monday through Friday, at the Oliver Archive Center, or visit our website. You can get there anyway. Just Google Chautauqua Institution Archives or CHQ Archives, etc. But it's the Archives website, right? We have our own website. You can search our newspapers, the Chautauqua Magazine, our photographs. You can find out what reference materials we have, etc. Now, if you like the lecture today, please let the administration know. And if you don't like what we're doing here, then you can just let me know. And that will be good enough. Well, I'm very happy now to get this thing going. I will ask, before I do that though, I'll remind you, we are having a book sale at the end of the lecture. This has Judge Griffin's book on JFK and the assassination. As you all know, he was the counsel for the Warren Commission. I have almost finished reading the book, and I have to say I really have found it fascinating. So you might want to pick this up at the end, and we'll have a bit of a book signing as well that will go along with it. Well, I'm going to ask Greg to come up. I don't really need to introduce Greg because I'm sure all of you know Greg Peterson from the Jackson Center in Jamestown.
Hello, everybody way out there. I'm Greg Peterson. I am an attorney, Phillips Lytle, and I am also the co-founder of the Robert H. Jackson Center, which was created in Jamestown, New York in 1941 to advance the legacy of Justice Jackson. What's the legacy? Was put on a Jeopardy question to simplistically name the only person in the history of the United States to be a Solicitor General, Attorney General, and a Justice of the United States. Robert H. Jackson, a man who never went to college, no college, never graduated from law school. He only went 1 year of Albany Law School, practiced 20 years here in Jamestown, then went into the government through his relationship with President Roosevelt, meteoric rise. Oh, did I forget to remember? I got to mention the fact that he was the chief American prosecutor at the Nuremberg trial, probably the largest criminal trial ever, and he's a man from here, right here, who spoke here, who spent time here, and in fact was there front and center when Franklin Roosevelt spoke that "I hate war" speech. I just walked across the Odland Plaza. There's a big picture of Franklin Roosevelt speaking at that very famous speech here at Chautauqua. And if you look at Roosevelt, and immediately to the left, you'll see Robert H. Jackson, because they were buds. They were buds, and he was part of bringing him here. I am so thrilled to be able to do this today. This has been in the making for some time, and Kudos to the Honorable Linda Rocker Silverberg and Dan Silverberg, who are over there and here. They are together, they're married, they're happily married, but for whatever security reasons, they sit separately. But they mentioned this, their friend, the Honorable Burt Griffin, and in 2016, and we've been corresponding and trying to get him here since then. You can do the math. And I'm not shy in my persistence, but here we are. It took a while to get the Honorable Burt Griffin because he wanted to make sure that he had available this book. And last year, drum roll, on Amazon, JFK, Oswald and Ruby, Politics, Prejudice and Truth, Burt W. Griffin, Warren Commission Assistant Counsel. Now, to really give it the gravitas, I could give a very long introduction and you don't want to hear from me anymore, other than to say he's the real deal. He is the real deal, and frankly, a connector, and I didn't think about it till this afternoon, to what we do at the Jackson Center. Robert H. Jackson was a United States Supreme Court Justice in 1941. In 1953, while Jackson was still on the court, Earl Warren became the Chief Justice of the United States. Jackson dies in 1954. In 1963, John F. Kennedy assassinated, and shortly thereafter, President Johnson persuades, does the LBJ touch on Chief Justice Warren to become part of one of the 7 commissioners to investigate the assassination of President Kennedy. And they in turn selected general counsel, and this was Lee Rankin, and they had 16 associate counsel. And I'm not making this up, there it is, Warren Commission. There's the headline, head front. And who do you see on there but Burt W. Griffin, who was part of 16, and that's it, sports fans. And here we are, 60 years later, we're blessed to have a first person who could talk about knowing Earl Warren as it connects to Robert Jackson knowing Earl Warren. And as part of his assignment, and he'll get into this in great detail, it will be the fact that he was assigned to learn everything there was about Jack Ruby and his movements prior to his public. How many people saw the assassination on TV? There we go. Unbelievable. And I too was one of them. It was just a moment in time. So we're thrilled beyond belief to have one of the 16, and I don't know this, Your Honor. By the way, but I say Your Honor, he was 30 years, he was the judge at the Cayuga County Courthouse. And so this guy has a long resume. So I'm going to stop because, again, you're done with me. So let's give a round of applause to the Honorable Burt Griffin.
Well, thank you, Greg, and thank you, Linda and Dan, for your hospitality and having met Greg. I want to get another show of hands. How many of you remember where you were when you first heard that the president was shot? Unbelievable. Yeah. Yesterday I spoke at the Jackson Center with 5 college interns. I'm not sure what they knew about the assassination, but I was about 1:30 in the afternoon on November 22nd, Friday, November 22nd, 1963. I was coming back from my law office from lunch, got into the elevator to go upstairs, and someone said, "The president has been shot." And my reaction was, and I don't know what yours might have been at that time, my reaction was, those damn segregationists. In June of 1963, Medgar Evers had been murdered. Medgar Evers, as you may recall, was an NAACP resident of Mississippi, and he was murdered in Mississippi for trying to organize black voters. In September of 1963, 4 months before the assassination, 4 children were killed in a bombing in Birmingham, Alabama, at the 16th Street Baptist Church. So civil rights and, of course, the Cold War were very much the topic of the day. And my reaction was, the segregationists did it. I was quite surprised then when within an hour of the shooting of President Kennedy, Lee Harvey Oswald, a former Marine who had defected to the Soviet Union and had come back to the United States in June of 1962 with a Russian wife, that Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested for the assassination of President, actually arrested, and I'm going to go into the details, for something else, but was very much related to the assassination. I was skeptical. I knew that the FBI put communist sympathizers at the very top of its list, and I thought it was really quite strange that Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested within an hour of President Kennedy's assassination, and that he was a patsy. Then, and I think we all remember this horrible weekend. I'm sure we spent almost all of our time watching television. I have my son, Bruce, who is here with me right now, sitting on the stage, who was 3 years old at the time of the assassination, and he remembers the whole weekend. So I remember Sunday afternoon, Sunday morning, at approximately 12:30 Eastern Standard Time, 11:30 Dallas time, Jack Ruby on television walked into the Dallas police station and walked right up to Lee Harvey Oswald and shot him with police officers, media around, forming the whole, filming and observing the whole situation. My reaction to that was, this was some kind of a crazy guy. This was, nobody who was a part of a conspiracy would have, in broad daylight, had shot the alleged killer of President Kennedy when he was then certain to be captured. And we had, believe it or not, killing the president in 1963 was not a federal offense. It would only be a federal offense if he was killed on federal property, and the president was killed on the streets of Dallas. So the responsibility for investigating the assassination of President Kennedy lay in the hands of the Dallas Police Department and the Dallas County Sheriff. But of course, the FBI and the Secret Service and the other federal investigative agencies could not simply stand there and do nothing. So they were primary assistants to the Dallas Police Department. So I think it's safe to say that a massive coordinated investigation then quickly fell into place, involving the Secret Service, the FBI, the State Department, the CIA, the Defense Department, and the local Dallas police authorities. Very quickly, J. Edgar Hoover, who was playing a primary role in this investigation, and as most of you will remember, was the head of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover came to a conclusion fairly quickly that Lee Oswald was the killer of President Kennedy, and that there was no conspiracy, there's no evidence of a conspiracy. And he wanted, Hoover, wanted quickly to file a report. Lyndon Johnson did not believe that the FBI's report would be accepted. And so he came up with the idea of appointing a presidential commission. He appointed two members, Democrats and Republicans of the House of Representatives, 2 members, Democrat and Republican senators of the United States, 2 independent individuals who were 2 non-governmental people, one John J. McCloy, who had been an ambassador to Germany and actually part of the oversight of the transition of the state of Germany after World War II, and then Allen Dulles, who was the head of the CIA but had been fired by President Kennedy because of a whole variety of reasons. And incidentally, even though he had been fired, that is, Dulles had been fired, relieved of his job by President Kennedy, Robert Kennedy himself recommended that Allen Dulles be a part of the commission. But the last person to be selected was the chief of the investigation and the Chief Justice of the United States, Earl Warren. And Warren had at first declined to oversee the investigation of his commission. He didn't think it was appropriate for a justice of the Supreme Court to be involved in any criminal investigation. He was aware that even though Lee Oswald was killed and obviously would not be tried, that there was a great possibility that any trial of Jack Ruby would be appealed to the Supreme Court. So he put himself in becoming the head of this investigating committee, placed him in a considerable period of conflict of interest. It took some arm twisting on the part of President Johnson to persuade the Chief Justice to accept the position. I remember vividly the first meeting that the staff had in January of 1964. Let me say it took about 2 months to assemble a staff, or a month and a half. I came to become a part of the staff of the Warren Commission in early January of 1964. By that time, the whole staff was assembled, and we had our first meeting with Chief Justice Warren. And it's one I remember vividly because he said to us, "Your only client is the truth." The determination was to find out what was the truth about the assassination of President Kennedy. And I will say to those of you in the audience that, I, in the worst way, and my fellow staff members in the worst way, wanted to find a conspiracy. I've said to some people, to different audiences, if I had found a conspiracy in the assassination of President Kennedy, I'd be the senator from Ohio and not John Glenn. But the basic work had been done before we ever came to become staff members. So there were over 20,000 witnesses of one sort or another who were interviewed in the course of the Warren Commission's work and the investigators that had gone on before us. So let's look a little bit at Lee Oswald and what we found out about Lee Oswald. Then I'd like to talk to you about Jack Ruby and what we found out about Jack Ruby. And finally, we'll get to the question of whether there's evidence of a conspiracy. I'm not going to conceal from you my position, although if you buy my book, you'll realize I don't state my position until the end of the book. But I have no doubt that Lee Oswald was the sole shooter and who murdered President Kennedy. And I also have no doubt that there is no evidence, after 60 years, there is no evidence that links Lee Oswald to anybody else. And I think if you understand Oswald as a person, you will understand why he did what he did. And I'm going to leave that for the end of my comments. So what was it like for people in Dallas at the time President Kennedy was shot at about 11:30 in the morning on Friday, November 20th, excuse me, about 12:30 afternoon when President Kennedy was shot by somebody. Two witnesses are important to this. One is Howard Brennan, who was a 40-year-old pipe fitter who was on a lunch break in Dealey Plaza, which is where the shooting took place. And the second one was Amos Ewens, a 14-year-old public school student who was probably skipping lunch. And each of them saw a man shoot at the president. Both of them were standing in Dealey Plaza. They were standing in a way that they could face up toward the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. They saw a man with a rifle who fired two shots that they saw, although 3 shots were actually heard, but they actually saw 2 shots fired from the 6th floor window, and immediately went to a police officer who was stationed in Dealey Plaza and gave a description of the man. And the description of the man was immediately broadcast through Dallas Police Radio to an all-police alert. So all Dallas police cars were on the alert to look for a man who was described by Howard Brennan and Amos Ewens. Meanwhile, a motorcycle policeman last name by the name of Baker, thought he heard shots and thought, although he didn't see the shooter, thought he heard shots come from the Texas School Book Depository. So he dropped his motorcycle as soon as he got to the School Book Depository, found the manager, Roy Truly, of the Texas School Book Depository, and began to go to the 6th floor to try to find any evidence of a shooter. When they got to the 2nd floor, Lee Harvey Oswald was on the 2nd floor. And Officer Baker went to him with the intention of arresting him. Roy Truly, the School Book Depository manager, said he was an employee, that he was okay, so they passed him up and they went up to the 6th floor. When they got to the 6th floor, they found a set of boxes set up in the nature of a parapet from which shots could be fired in the 6th floor window. Later, it was learned, and very quickly later, with FBI help, that these were fingerprints that were on the boxes that were set up that belonged to Lee Harvey Oswald. There was also found 3 empty cartridges from bullets, very close to this parapet that was set up. A few feet away, between a stack of boxes, was found a rifle. The Post Office Department and the FBI quickly tried to track down the ownership of the rifle, and the owner was named A.J. Hiddell, but the rifle had been sent to a post office box that was owned by Lee Harvey Oswald, and so it was accepting mailings from Lee Harvey to A.J. Hiddell and Lee Harvey Oswald. Meanwhile, the description, as I said, the description of Oswald had been broadcast over police radio. Oswald, as soon as Baker and Truly had seen him on the second floor lunchroom and let him go, Oswald then purchased a soft drink from the soft drink machine. He began to walk out of the lunchroom, and when he passed one of the secretaries remarked that she thought the president had been shot. Oswald didn't say anything, walked out of the building, and went as quickly as he could, a few blocks to where there was a Dallas public bus. The bus was stopped in traffic. Oswald knocked on the door of the bus to get in. When he got, and the bus driver let him in, and when Oswald got into the bus, he was seen by a woman who recognized him. She had been his landlady. The bus then again got stuck in traffic, and this time Oswald, and it only went a few blocks, and it again got stuck in traffic. Oswald left the bus, got a bus transfer, and walked a couple of blocks to a Greyhound bus station, where there was a cab in front of the Greyhound bus station. He got into the cab and asked to be taken to North Beckley Street, where he was living alone in a rooming house. He didn't have the bus driver stop at the rooming house. The cab driver drove by the rooming house, drove about a block or a block and a half beyond the rooming house. Oswald then got out, walked back to the rooming house, was seen approximately 1 p.m. By the landlady in that rooming house, go into his room, get a jacket, and we know later that he also got a pistol and 16 bullets. He quickly left the rooming house and began walking in the neighborhood. After walking a few blocks, it was at that point in this residential neighborhood that he was spotted by Dallas police officer J.D. Tippett. Officer Tippett, perhaps responding to the description that had been given over police radio of the suspected shooter, because the description actually was relatively similar to what Oswald looked like. In any event, Tippett stopped his car, summoned Oswald to the car, got out of the car, and began to walk around the front of the car. Oswald pulled out his pistol, which he had got at his rooming house, and fired 3 shots into Officer Tippett. And with Officer Tippett lying on the ground, he fired a 4th shot into his head. Those actions, with respect to Officer Tippett, were seen by 2 witnesses. Oswald then fled, and the 2 witnesses got their hands on Officer Tippett's radio microphone, told gave a description of Oswald and told him that Officer Tippit had been killed, or had been shot. I'm not sure they knew he was killed. And so then the police were summoned, and as Oswald got to a commercial street with a series of stores and a theater in the string of stores, Oswald heard the sounds of the arriving police cars. Instead of looking around and to see what that action was, he walked into the entranceway without going into the store, but walked into the entranceway of a shoe store with his back to the street. That attracted the attention because the attention of the store manager was also attracted from the sounds of the possibly arriving police cars. So the store manager, the shoe store manager, saw this strange person with his back to the street and had a very good view of Oswald. And as soon as the car sirens began not to have any more sound, Oswald then did not go into the shoe store. Oswald then went back onto the sidewalk, and about 2 or 3 doors away was the Texas Theater. The cashier of the Texas Theater had been attracted by these police sirens. She had left her place, her booth for selling tickets, and she was standing at the curb trying to see what was going on, where these police sirens were coming from. So with her back to the arriving Oswald, Oswald went into the theater, didn't pay for anything, but he was being followed by the shoe store manager. The shoe store manager told the cashier that she should call the police. The police were summoned. They arrived very quickly. The lights were turned on in the theater. The store manager pointed out the person he had seen standing outside the shoe store, and one of the officers then approached Lee Harvey Oswald. As the officer approached Oswald, the officer, or rather Oswald, reached into his pocket, pulled out his pistol, and attempted to shoot the arresting officer. Fortunately, the officer was able to place his hand on the gun, stop the gun from firing, and Oswald was taken into custody. This was approximately 1 hour after the assassination of President Kennedy. He was immediately taken to the Homicide Bureau, where the homicide chief had already become aware that Oswald had left the Texas School Book Depository because the School Book Depository manager had summoned all of the employees for a lineup, and Oswald was one of 2 employees who did not show up. So when Oswald was taken to the homicide office, there was already a desire to arrest Oswald because they had his name and not quite the right address, but they had his name. And the arresting officer who ultimately brought him in when Officer Fritz, homicide detective Fritz, told him to go to a particular address and try to get Lee Harvey Oswald, he said, "Here's your man right here." So there was Oswald. And Oswald then obviously became the prime suspect in 2 killings, one of J.D. Tippit, police officer J.D. Tippit, the other of President Kennedy. And our job was then to find out as much as we could about Oswald's conduct. I brought my son Bruce here so that he can do what I'm not able to do at this point, and that is that my eyes aren't good enough to be able to read to you Oswald's last night before he shot President Kennedy. But this is Thursday night, November 21st. And Bruce, you want to take over?
Sure. Sit down. Go ahead. Now, these are from pages 270 to 272 of future bestseller, right? I will mention that parts of this are cited from another book by Priscilla McMillan, Marina and Lee, which my father highly recommends to you, but I'm not going to give you all the footnotes on this, okay? I'm just going to read this through straight. Between 4:45 and 5 p.m. on Thursday, Lee Oswald was about to arrive unexpectedly at Ruth Payne's home in Irving. Ruth Payne was the woman that Marina Oswald was staying with. When she saw Lee leave the car and walk to the front door, Marina did not leave the bedroom. She did not go to greet him. She looked sullen as he entered the bedroom. Inwardly, she was pleased that he had come. "You didn't think I was coming?" "Of course not. How come you came out today?" "Because I got lonesome for my girls." He took her by the shoulders to give her a kiss. Marina turned her face away and pointed to a pile of clothes. "There are your clean shirt and socks and pants. Go in and wash up." Lee did as he was told. "I'm clean now," he said as he emerged from the bathroom. "Are you angry at me still?" "Of course," she said, turning away another kiss. Marina tried to leave the bedroom, but he blocked the door and would not let her go until she allowed him to kiss her. With utter indifference, like a rag doll, she let him kiss her. "Enough," Lee said, angry that she was not glad to see him. "You get too much spoiling here. I'm going to find an apartment tomorrow and take all three of you with me." "I won't go," Marina said. "If you don't want to come in, then I'll take Junie and Rachel, the two kids. They love their papa, and you don't love me." "That's fine," said Marina. "Just you try nursing Rachel. You know what that's like. It will be less work for me." Marina then left the bedroom and went outside to bring the children's clothes in off the line. "Why won't you come with me?" Lee begged. "I'm tired of living all alone. I'm in here the whole week long and my girls are here. I don't like having to come all the way out here each time I want to see you." "Alka," Marina said, which was his nickname in Russian. "I think it's better if I stay here. I'll stay till Christmas and you'll go on living alone. We'll save money that way. I can talk to Ruth and she's a help to me. I'm lonesome by myself with no one here all day." "Don't worry about the money," Lee said. "We have a little saved up. I'll take an apartment and we'll buy you a washing machine." "I don't want a washing machine. It would be better if you bought me a car." "I don't need a car," he said. "I can go on the bus. If you buy a used car, you have to spend money to get it fixed. It's not worth it. I don't want my girl to have to do all the laundry in the bathtub. With two babies, you can't do it all alone." "We'll see," Marina said. A little bit later, Lee asked her for the third and last time to move to Dallas with him. His voice was now very kind, quite different from what it had been in the bedroom. Once again, he said he was tired of living alone and seeing his babies only once a week. Marina, for the third time, refused. "I was like a stubborn little mule," she recalls. "I was maintaining my inaccessibility, trying to show Lee that I wasn't easy to persuade. If he'd come again the next day and asked, of course I would have agreed. I just wanted to hold out for one day at least." Then Judge Griffin writes, "One must wonder, as I and my Warren Commission colleagues did, whether this plea for Marina to resume living with him was Lee Oswald, the frequent liar, covering up a firmly committed plan to kill the president, or whether it was Lee, the lonely, uncertain man who wanted fervently to restore his life with Marina and had not made a firm decision even the night before the assassination. Marina, as usual, was the last to go to bed. It was at least an hour. Lee was not asleep, and suddenly, with a sort of wordless vehemence, he lifted her leg, shoved her foot hard, then pulled his leg away. My, he's in a mean mood, Marina thought. She realized that he was sleepless, tense, and she believed that he was so angry at her for refusing to move to Dallas that it was no use trying to talk to him. She thinks he fell asleep around 5 o'clock in the morning. On the morning of Friday, November 22nd, the alarm rang and he did not get up. Marina, time to get up, Alka. Okay. He rose, washed, and got dressed. Then he came over to the bed. Have you bought those shoes you were going to get? No, I haven't had time. You must get those shoes, Mama. And Mama, don't get up. I'll get breakfast by myself. Lee kissed the children who were sleeping, but he did not kiss Marina, as he always did before he left in the morning. He got as far as the bedroom door, then came and said, I left some money on the bureau. Take it and buy everything you and Junie and Rachel need. Bye-bye. Then Lee went out the door. Then she fell back to sleep. He left more than money. In the cup on the dresser, he left his wedding ring, which he had never done before. The total money that was left for Marina was $170, which people will remember was a lot of money in those days. He took with him about $15, enough for bus fare from Dallas to the Mexican border.
Bruce, thanks so much. I think in order to understand Lee Harvey Oswald, you have to know a lot about him. I particularly thought it was important to know that what was happening in his life in the last days before the assassination. The reason Marina was surprised to see him was that Marina his practice had been to make, excuse me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. It had been his practice to make 2 phone calls a day to Marina, but he had not telephoned her from Monday evening until he arrived unexpectedly on Thursday, November 21st. The reason he did that was that she refused to talk to him. She refused to accept his phone calls. She found out at that point that he was living under a fictitious name, and she thought that he was back to doing some kinds of things that she didn't approve of. And I'm going to get later on to what those kinds of things were. But I think it's important to know that his life was falling apart, and his marriage was falling apart. His job was only a seasonal job. He was a temporary employee at the Texas School Book Depository, and as soon as the books for the fall semester and the year were sold out of the School Book Depository, he'd be losing his job. So he'd probably be losing his job by the first of the year. And also he was being watched somewhat, but not closely enough, by FBI agent James Hosty. And so he was worried that if he had to go and get another job, the FBI would be tracking him, and potential employers would find out that he was somebody that the FBI wanted to look after, and he wouldn't get a job. So his life and his business future were pretty much at rock bottom. The other important thing I wanted Bruce to read to you was the fact that he had taken off his wedding ring. It seems to me that was significant. Why did he take off and leave his wedding ring? And as we get later on in my presentation, we'll get to some more of these details. The easier job was my job, and that was to try to find out why Jack Ruby shot Lee Oswald. And I'd like to share this with you. When Jack Ruby was arrested, he was immediately taken to the 5th floor of the Dallas police station. And Secret Service agent Forrest Sorrells asked him, "Jack, why did you do it?" And his answer was, "I had to show the world a Jew had guts." Ruby was absolutely convinced that Jews were going to be blamed for the assassination of President Kennedy. He was particularly worried about this for two reasons. One is that in April of 1963, there had been a wave of anti-Semitic violence in Dallas when, and we'll get to this later, Lee Harvey Oswald attempted his first attempt to commit an assassination. And that is in April of 1963, Oswald attempted to assassinate former General Edwin Walker, whom probably most of you have never heard of. And it's a story I want to go into in some detail with you in a few minutes. But I'll stay with the Ruby story because the Ruby story is really easier. So anti-Semitism in 1963 was quite prevalent in Dallas. And when Oswald shot at General Walker and was never suspected for shooting at Walker, and a subsequent set of anti-Semitic vandalism occurred. That is, that stores of Jewish merchants were vandalized, homes of Jewish merchants were vandalized. The home of Stanley Marcus, of Neiman Marcus, was vandalized. People canceled their credit cards at Neiman Marcus. So anti-Semitism was very much on Ruby's mind, as it had been for a very long time, since his birth in I think it was 1912 in Chicago. So then on the morning of November 22nd, there appeared in the Dallas Morning News a newspaper ad that attracted Jack Ruby's attention. And it was a full-page, black-bordered advertisement that started with the words, the headline, "Welcome to Dallas, Mr. Kennedy," but it was not a welcoming message. And if you read then the rest of this full-page article, full-page advertisement, it was very much an attack on President Kennedy. And it was signed with the name Bernard Weissman, which Ruby recognized as a Jewish name. And Ruby's reaction to the ad, and we know this because he complained that morning while he was placing his own ads for his striptease nightclubs at the advertising department of the Dallas Morning News. We know that he was complaining about this ad, and he believed that no one who was Jewish would sign as chairman an anti-Kennedy ad. So he believed that that the Weissman name was a fictitious name. And in fact, Ruby became the first private conspiracy investigator, because he was convinced that whoever shot President Kennedy was going to be blamed, that it was all for the purpose of trying to have Jews blamed for the assassination. And then when he became aware later in the morning that the president had been shot and died. He saw the black border on the ad as indicating some kind of a death message. So he then began to search for Bernard Weissman. And Ruby was quite an investigator. He looked in the telephone directory and he couldn't find Weissman's name. Somebody suggested that he look at a street directory and he couldn't find Weissman's name. So he was then confirmed in his belief that Weissman was a fictitious person. In fact, Weissman was a real person. I'll get to that in a minute. So then Ruby had the idea that there was an Impeach Earl Warren billboard that was near one of the Dallas freeways. And he thought maybe the post office box number that was on the Impeach Earl Warren billboard might somehow be linked to the post office box number that was on the Weissman ad. So at about 4 o'clock in the morning, Ruby was unmarried. He got his roommate out of bed. He called Larry Crayford, who was a kind of night watchman at his nightclub, the Carousel Club, had Larry Crayford get his, we didn't have cell phones, mobile phones those days, so to get a camera that he had at the Carousel Club. And they went out at 4 o'clock in the morning to photograph the Impeach Earl Warren billboard. And then they went to the post office and tried to summon a postal worker to tell him who had placed the Impeach Earl Warren billboard and who had placed the advertisement. Well, of course, they wouldn't tell him. But in any event, Ruby didn't get a lot of sleep from the time that the president was shot until he shot Oswald. On Sunday morning, with having gone through all this investigative effort, and I've really left out a lot of other things that he did, but he admitted in his when interrogated by Chief Justice Warren, he admitted that he began to think about killing Oswald by the time he got up on Sunday morning. And the Dallas police had announced that at 10 o'clock in the morning, they were planning to transfer Oswald from the Dallas Police Department to the county jail. So media people were told, you don't have to get there before 10 o'clock in the morning. Ruby was in bed at 9:30 in the morning when his cleaning lady called him and said she was coming over to clean the apartment. So he got up and then he had previously obtained a telephone call from one of his dancers, one of his striptease dancers, a gal who danced under the name of Little Lynn. And Little Lynn had not been paid because Ruby had closed his nightclubs for the weekend. And so she needed money. And Ruby said, well, he was going downtown, that he would send her a $25 money order. So Ruby then gets in his car after 10 o'clock in the morning, substantially after 10 o'clock in the morning, closer to 11 o'clock in the morning. He not only has plenty of money with him, but he has his favorite. Ruby owns 7 dogs, and his favorite dog was Sheba, whom he referred to as his wife. And he took to go downtown on this morning when he was going to shoot President Kennedy, Sheba, and he parked his car with Sheba in the car across the street from the Western Union office, which was 1 block from the Dallas police station. He stood in line to send Little Lynn a $25 money order. We know that the money order was sent at 11:21 in the morning. He noticed a crowd outside of the police station, which was waiting for Oswald to be transported to the sheriff's department or the county jail. So he was able to walk down the ramp, which he says is how he got in. We had considerable doubts about it. My partner, investigative partner, Leon Hubert, and I had considerable doubts as to whether he was telling the truth, but ultimately decided he was. And in any event, we know that he left the Western Union office at approximately 11:21, and I think it was, Bruce helped me on this, was it 11:24 or 11:27 that we know that he shot Lee Harvey Oswald. So, and as I indicated to you, when arrested and asked why, he said, "I had to show the world that you had guts." So here we are, one very mixed up person who was not part of a conspiracy. In fact, who involved in any conspiracy would have somebody shoot the victim on television, and particularly who would ever utilize Jack Ruby, who loved to talk. He was not a person who would keep himself silent. So that's the story of Lee Harvey the killing of Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, how much time do we have here?
Well, what I'm going to do now, you're going to continue on your story, but in the meantime, we're going to go to question and answer. Often there's a little bit of awkwardness of when the speaker stops and the Q&A comes up. So I'm going to let him just talk because he's got a million things going on. But at the same time, now, anybody has any questions, write them. I'll be here because when we go like this, Judge, and go to Q&A, we'll be ready. So if anybody has any questions, raise your hand. There'll be people around to pick them up. Carry on, Judge.
Okay, so what about Lee Oswald? Why did Lee Oswald shoot President Kennedy? When Lee Oswald returned from his defection, and perhaps I should have a better word for this. When Lee Oswald was a very disturbed young man. He had gone to 12 different schools before he was 16. As soon as he reached age 17, he joined the Marines, not because he was a patriot. He in fact considered himself, even at that point, to be a Marxist. He joined the Marines because he wanted to get away from his mother, as had his two older brothers. He was not a good Marine, and when he was able to get an early release from the Marine Corps, he had already decided that he wanted to find a more perfect society. He wanted to find it in the Soviet Union. So he went to the Soviet Union. He left within a week of the time that he was released from the Marines. He went there ostensibly as a tourist. But then as soon as he got to Moscow, he indicated that he wanted to stay and become a citizen. The Soviets turned him down. And when he became aware that he would not be accepted, but he was still in the Soviet Union on his tourist visa, he did not appear at the time he was supposed to appear for the in-tourist guide. When she was able to go up and find Oswald's room and find him, she and the people who opened the door for her found him unclothed, bleeding in his bathtub, a purported attempt at suicide. There is some question as to whether this really was an attempt at suicide or whether it was just a way to attract attention. But the result of this so-called suicide attempt was for the Soviets, who were concerned that they would be blamed for attempting to kill Oswald. They agreed to let him stay. They let him go. They sent him to Minsk to be a factory worker. He became unhappy in Minsk because he truly hoped to be able to become an aide of some sort to the Soviet Union. But he wanted to go to a college that trained foreigners in Marxist kinds of things, but they wouldn't do it. They kept him as a factory worker. He then, in January of 1961, and at this point, he is, excuse me, yeah, he's 20. At this point, he's 22 years old. No, he's still 20. His birthday was in October. So January of 1961, when he's still 20 years old, he falls in love with a Jewish woman by the name of Emma Goldman. Emma Goldman turned him down. But a month later, at a union dance, he met a very attractive young 18-year-old woman, 17-year-old woman named Marina. I'm trying to remember what her last name was. But anyhow, first name was Marina. She lived an unhappy life, and for some reason or other, she was very attracted to him. So having met her, I think, for the first time in February, he proposed to her, and they were married on the 1st of May of 1961. She quickly became pregnant. Her child was born on January, hold me to this one also, Bruce, January 14th or January 15th, 1962.
15.
Okay. And he very quickly after having married her decided he wanted to come back to the United States. They ultimately got to the United States in Texas in June of 1962. This is 17 months before the assassination of President Kennedy. He has no friends. He has no contacts.
Your Honor, I hesitate. You kidding me? I'm a lawyer. You never stop a judge. You're kidding me? At no point. At pure risk. But there are so many questions here, and
Go ahead.
if you don't mind, and I know you're not shy about answering some of these questions. The one was talking about Oswald, because you're kind of currently tracking him as he finds his way to his destiny. The question is, what was Oswald's level of intelligence? Did you get any sense of that on the commission?
Sure. He'd been tested on 2 occasions. One of his tests showed that he had an IQ of 105. So he was average IQ. Go ahead.
There was another question, similar in vein, from Dr. William Pettinger. He's a professor of medicine at the University of Texas Southwestern Med School. And he wondered likewise about Jack Ruby's medical condition and the reason really for some of his kind of stupid decisions. You get a sense of that?
Well, we don't know that he had any particular problems, medical problems at the time he shot Oswald. We do know that he ultimately died a couple of years later of cancer, but there's no indication that he had cancer at that point.
Yeah. Do you have a thought regarding the theory of the magic bullet?
Well, there's no magic to this bullet. Look at it. What people are referring to is whether a bullet hit President Kennedy at the back of the neck and then went through his neck and struck Governor Connally in Connally's back. The evidence is clear that the wounds and wound ballistic experts have testified to this. In fact, even Cyril Wecht, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Cyril Wecht. Cyril Wecht really accepts what I'm about to say, that the wound in the back of Kennedy's neck was an exit wound. The wound that was in the front of his neck, by the time it got to the autopsy physicians, had been obliterated by doctors in Parkland Hospital who were put a tracheotomy in there in the hopes of saving the president's life. However, they thought the wound was so clear and clean cut that was an entrance wound. Well, if there was an entrance wound, if a bullet entered in the front of the neck and entered in the back of the neck, then there should have been some bullets in the president's body. And there should have been some exit wounds. There was none. After conversations that took place on the night of the autopsy in Bethesda, Maryland, between the Bethesda doctors who conducted the autopsy and the Parkland doctors, they all agreed that the bullet that struck the back of the president's neck was an entrance wound. And incidentally, the fibers on the president's shirt in the back of his or coat, I'm not sure whether it was coat or shirt, the fibers anyhow were pointed inward, indicating that was confirming that the wound ballistics autopsy physicians that this was an entrance wound in the back of his neck. All right, as I say, there were no bullets found in his body. So where did the bullet go? The wounds what we do know about the fibers in the front of the president's neck, the shirt in the front of the president's neck were pointed outward, therefore confirming what the most likely thing was, that the bullet went through the back of the neck, exited the front, but then where did it go? We know that there were bullet wounds that were consistent with a bullet having exited the president's neck and striking Governor Connally. But a bullet was ultimately found, and it was found in Parkland Hospital, and it was found near a location at which Governor Connally's stretcher at the hospital had rested. So the conclusion was drawn that the bullet that was found at Parkland Hospital came from Governor Connally, and that had gone through Governor Connally and caused all sorts of damage there. I hope that's an answer to the magic bullet, because if there was a magic bullet that once it exited the president's neck, it had to go up like that. That would have been the magic.
Just show you how many questions we have here for you, Your Honor. We will not get to them all, but you've created a great deal of interest. How did Ruby get such access to Oswald without help?
First of all, Oswald Ruby had been able to get into the Dallas police station on Friday night and at any time that he wanted to on Saturday. It was because the city manager of Dallas had urged the police department to make the police station completely accessible to the media. So if any of you remember, the media, it was absolutely jammed. The hallways were jammed. They could not bring Oswald from his holding cell to where he was being questioned by the Homicide Bureau without going through a whole array of media people. Ruby got the idea that he would ingratiate. He already had relationships with the police department, but Ruby decided that he would ingratiate himself with the police department by trying to bring them some corned beef sandwiches and some Coke. So he bought 6 corned beef sandwiches and 6 Cokes. But then was told that they didn't need any corned beef sandwiches because they'd already eaten. But so those corned beef sandwiches were in his car. But he then fashioned for himself a badge that he could put on his shirt, which said something about the media. And he told the police that he was a translator for the Israeli press. So that was how he ingratiated himself and got in. And the police were. I haven't got to how he got in that particular morning, but I think that that's some of the background on it.
Several questions about how did you get selected to be one of 16 counsel, associate counsel to the commission?
Well, I want to ask most of you, how did you get your jobs? You know, you probably knew somebody. And I happen to know somebody that I was a young lawyer, 32 years old, 31 years old at the time. And I had become friendly with some lawyers, which we have an Ohio judge here, federal judge from Ohio, who was here. I'll tell him, he's a lawyer in Jones Day, Revis, and Pope. It was then Jones Day, Cockley, and Revis. And so one of my law school classmates had been hired as a young lawyer at Jones Day, and there was another young lawyer at Jones Day named David Filveroff, who got to know me at cocktail parties. And I had been at that point, although I was in private practice, I had been in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Cleveland. So it turns out that Dave Filveroff, who had been at Jones Day, was working for Robert Kennedy. And they were looking for a diverse staff. Now remember, this is 1963. Diversity doesn't mean having women on the staff. We were the only, they were only men on our staff. It didn't mean having anybody who was African American, although we did have one of the 16 a person who was African American. But that wasn't why he got the job. They wanted political diversity, and they wanted geographic diversity. So they needed somebody from the Midwest. And this guy, Dave Filveroff, who was an assistant to Robert Kennedy, who then knew other people who were trying to select staff people for the Warren Commission, he somehow came up with my name, and it didn't hurt that I went to the same law school as the guy who was actually making the final choices. So it's...
That was Yale, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not admitting that any longer.
At least three questioners, they all said essentially, why did Oswald choose Kennedy to assassinate?
I think, and you'll have to buy the book to really get the details here, because I'm not...
And you'll be able to do so in about 15 minutes.
It's at least a 10 or 15 minute explanation of all the details. But the bottom line is that Oswald had, in April of 1963, attempted to assassinate Edwin Walker. And by the time Kennedy came to Dallas in November of 1963, the biggest fear was that the Walkers support, Edwin Walker, it's not Wallace, Edwin Walker, that the Walker supporters, who were very right-wing people, that they posed a danger to President Kennedy, because Edwin Walker, approximately a month before the president came to Dallas, Edwin Walker's supporters had disrupted a speech in Dallas by Adlai Stevenson, and one of the Walker supporters had hit Stevenson on the head with an anti-Stevenson sign. So there was a great fear in Dallas that Kennedy would be in danger from them. Walker himself feared that he would be blamed for the assassination. Walker very conveniently arranged for himself not to be in Dallas on November 22nd, but he was on an airplane flight from, I think, Shreveport to New Orleans. And believe it or not, while he was on that flight, people then learned that the president had been shot. This is before cell phones and whatnot, so it speaks to what a significant event this was. And so the passengers on the plane became aware that the president had been shot in Dallas. Walker then got out of his seat, went to the flight attendants to tell them that he was on the flight, and got the names and jobs of the flight attendants that he talked to. So Walker himself feared that he was going to be blamed for the assassination. And Oswald, and there's a lot more detail in this if you read the book, but I'm satisfied that there were at least 3 reasons that Oswald shot President Kennedy, and they all mesh. They're not independent reasons, but they're factors that are all at work here. One was the collapse of his life, the leaving of that wedding ring for Marina. The other was that when he was in the Soviet Union, he kept a diary of his stay in the Soviet Union. He headed the diary, Historic Diary. He wanted to be a man of history. And he had expressed this to some of the people who knew him in the Marine Corps. So he had an idea of wanting to somehow impact the world. And I think it was not helpful to Kennedy, and it was supportive of Oswald, that Oswald believed, and now subsequently we know was true, Oswald believed that Kennedy was trying to assassinate Fidel Castro. And this was one of the secrets that was kept from the Warren Commission. The CIA and Allen Dulles knew that they were trying to assassinate, that Kennedy had been trying to assassinate Dulles. So that Oswald's assassinating Kennedy was just a part of the rule. That was part of the rules of war at that point. There was nothing wrong with assassinating a leader of a country that he didn't approve of. But I think also the fact that he had tried to kill Walker is of extreme importance. One of the newspapers to which Oswald subscribed, the Worker, which was published in New York, it was the Communist Party newspaper, had run an editorial after Walker had tried to stop the integration of the University of Mississippi. They had run an editorial likening Edwin Walker to Hitler. So then Walker was arrested for the things that happened at the University of Mississippi. But you won't be surprised to know that a Mississippi grand jury declined to indict Walker in January of 1963. That was the point at which then Oswald then bought his first weapon. And then he bought a pistol, obviously hoping to just go up point blank, facing Walker and shooting him. But then he began to stake out the house and found out that Walker could be shot if he was in his office in his home, and that Oswald could hide behind a fence and fire the shots. So in April he tried when
Judge, if I could, oh man, this is really dangerous, but they got some folks over there who do want to sell books, but they're going to be leaving fairly soon. So If we, for those interested,
We should recess then and
Pardon?
let them buy the books, right?
that's right, exactly. I want to buy a book. I mean, if we're here, let's talk. Judge Burt Griffin.